This is a fan-generated show. If you would like to support us, please go to jamieglazov.com and also don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. All your support is greatly appreciated.
Good evening. Welcome to the Glazov Gang. Tonight we have a very special guest, Shireen Qudosi, a Muslim free thinker who is the director of Muslim Matters with America Matters. Shireen, welcome to the Glazov Gang.
Hi, Jamie. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. It's an honor to have you on, and so many things to talk about. Let's begin with this. Shireen, recently you called out Linda Sarsour on some of the very strange and I would argue barbaric, vicious things that she said about Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Let's begin with that.
The Women's March, which Linda was a co-chair of, it had no real policy. It had no message aside that they were protesting Trump. And that entire march began when that unfortunate video of then President-elect came out. So yet at the same time, you have here a woman who in the past years had tweeted out a message, really this aggressive, hostile message against Brigitte Gabriel and Ayaan Hirsi Ali, vulgarly saying that she wanted to take their womanhood away in more graphic terms than this. And yet she is somehow the champion of a feminist march, and that absolutely is the most hypocritical thing I've ever heard. Linda Sarsour is through and through an Islamist. People think that she's a minority because she's from Brooklyn, she was a hijab, but she's actually the radical right of another political ideology. And that ideology, that political ideology is Islamism. So to have an Islamist, someone who's basically the alt-right of another political group, up there as the head of a women's march, it makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So let's look at what her political ideology believes in. Under Sharia law, the Women's March in DC alone had a turnout of 500,000. Under Sharia law, that turnout would be dwarfed to 250,000. Under Sharia law, every single woman who attended would be subject to beatings from her husband. She would also be denied intimacy for up to an X number of months through these quote-unquote vulgar acts of participating in this march. So to have Linda Sarsour be some sort of champion of women's rights, it is completely antithetical to the entire idea of what those women were there for.
Thank you, Shireen. I must say, you know, as a Muslim free thinker, you are a very brave woman saying many brave things. Let's even get to this. Now, you spoke at a congressional hearing on the problem of terror. And during that hearing, you were very honest about some of the problems within Islam. You spoke about things that are in the Quran, text in the Quran, and you even referred to the Prophet Muhammad, and one word you had used is warmongering. And you were threatened in terms of this, called names because of what you did. Let's start at the beginning and tell us what happened here at this congressional hearing.
So it was a congressional hearing with Zuhdi Jasser, who's another reformer, and the purpose was to discuss the counter-violent extremism program, which Zuhdi Jasser rightly calls, it should be called countering Islamic extremism. So my role was really to talk about the historical context of why we got here. What is Islam's origin story and how did we get here? Because to understand Islamism and extremism today, I believe we have to go back to the sort of the basement of Islamic history to really understand how did it get started and where does ISIS getting its justification from. In my understanding, and as a free thinker, I don't just look at Islam through a sort of religious lens. I look at it through a historical, a psychological, and sociological lens, among other things. So if we look at the Prophet and we take him off the platform of a demigod and we look at him as a human being and we look at how other people would have seen him, we can reasonably, as reasonable, rational, logical people, understand that while he would be a prophet of God to Muslims, to non-Muslims, through the jihad campaigns that he authorized, he would be seen as a warmonger. And it is completely reasonable to say so. It is not an attack on the faith. It is looking at the subject historically through basic psychology of how he'd be seen by other people. And for that, I received an immense amount of threats and hostility from CARE, among other groups as well.
What were they saying?
Well, Care didn't waste any time. Care's tried to harass me before I even walked through the doors. But as soon as the video was wrapped up, Care took a segment and they put it up on YouTube. And knowing that their audience is a little bit irrational, they put this completely warped title on it, saying that I'm saying that the prophet's a warmonger without any sort of historical context, without any sort of understanding of where's the frame for this conversation coming from. And they threw that out there. And then I was attacked on Twitter by Zara Bilu, by Hussein Ailush, and their minions, because what these people do is they tag team and they try to bully you, they try to shame you, and they try to harass you to waste your time and drain your resources.
Shireen, we're living in a very strange world now. On Facebook, you've got jihadists, or on social media, Facebook, you've got these jihadists, Islamists, Islamic supremacists, with all kinds of hateful rhetoric and citing their texts. But you tried to tell the truth about some aspects of Islam, and you were actually banned from Facebook.
I was initially. I went up against Javed Ali. He is the publisher of a once very popular first Muslim magazine that received a lot of awards called Ilu magazine. And he's connected with the sort of Bay Area rat pack of Islamists. And these are people who appear very progressive. They're very trendy, but ultimately they don't challenge the rhetoric and they don't challenge the real purpose here. So rather than having the Islamic Renaissance again, or talking about how Islam is really cool and trendy, let's talk about where the other half of Muslims who partake or justify violence, where they're coming from. So this is the sort of character that I was dealing with. And I actually defended colleague Ryan Morrow and his training of the San Diego Police Department. And so for that, I had Javed harassed me privately, and I threatened to take his messages and make them public. As a result, he blitzkrieged my account, got me banned from Facebook, which went from being a partial slap on the wrist to a full ban. And I had to, of course, then waste another week of my time trying to get my rights back on Facebook.
Incredible. Shireen, with the little time we have, because we can talk about so many things, but let's just shift over now to the political world and the climate, everything that's going on. In terms of Trump and the travel ban, quote unquote, your thoughts on it?
So it's not even a travel ban. And of course, we hear that Muslims are calling it, quote unquote, a Muslim ban. It is a temporary and necessary restriction on 7 red flag states that are gateways for terrorists. So the rhetoric that we hear in the media are the sob stories of refugees. And I understand that. I was a refugee from Afghanistan to Pakistan to Iran to Germany and then to the States. So I understand the full spectrum of what it means to be a refugee. But this is not about our personal stories. This is about national security. And so when we've got ISIS infiltrating, when we can't vet people in a failed security state where there's war and it's really difficult to vet people, we need to be as cautious as possible, because our number one priority should be the safety of the American people and not these sob stories. If we want to talk about sob stories, then let's talk about radical Islam. I think that's the biggest sob story we have right now, as far as what it's doing to Muslims and what it's doing to the victims of jihadists and other Islamists.
Thank you, Shireen. Now, look, you're an amazing person in terms of also, of course, being a Muslim free thinker. Let's go into your background a bit and into your own personal journey. How did you arrive to who you are and this message that you have?
I feel, Jamie, that it was really a lifelong path, and I truly believe that it is a path that God has put me on. He's put me in this community, in this religion, with this family, with this immense experience that I've had a chance to live in 3 different continents, and really experience what it's like to be, on the full spectrum, from living in Pakistan, living in Iran, having that Afghan background, being a refugee in Germany, and trying to acculturate and what it means to be American in the States. And as a woman, I think as a woman, as a Muslim woman, we have a really special story to tell. We have a special challenge ahead of us in terms of being heard, in terms of having our rights secured, even in the States. So this is really where it came from. It's a lifelong process for me, and I finally got to the point where this is the only thing I want to be doing. It's hard for me to focus on anything other than reform work and ensuring American values are secured.
Shireen, thank you. Look, I was reading a lot of your work and your writings, and all really fascinating. You have a biographical essay that I was really enchanted with and hypnotized by, and there's a few other words you can use, but just really profound reading. Let's touch on this for a minute. You write very honestly that growing up in Pakistan, that you could feel a certain unhappiness and that something just wasn't right when you were growing up in terms of, especially I think we could say, women and their discomfort and unhappiness. Am I correct?
Yeah, I wrote that essay, which you can find on my website, muslimreformers.com, and I received a lot of backlash for that as well from the Pakistani community, which has trouble being self-critical. And I was told there's no way you could remember what it was like to be 4 and 5, but I remember vividly what it was like to be 4 and 5 in Pakistan. And I remember that it was a very stagnant society, and there really wasn't life. I mean, I talk about one instance where we had these mango parties, and it was this sort of fervor in the air, but from day one, as far as I can remember, I felt like an outcast in that society, which is particularly interesting because at age 4 and 5, I had nothing else to compare it to. No other awareness of what the world was like or what other countries and cultures were like. But something isn't inherently right or free about that society. And there are so many people there in Pakistan now who I call the silent majority, who are free thinkers in Islam. These people are not represented by mainstream Islam in the United States, and they're not represented by the dictatorships and theocracies of the Middle East. But these are people who want to be speaking out, who want more freedoms. And it's up to us as American Muslims who have the rights and privileges of the Constitution to speak out for them at this point.
Thank you, Shireen. Now, at one point, you write about how when you were young, you were dreaming of fantasizing kind of, or dreaming of being a witch, you said. Now, look, in terms of the audience, we obviously, and I understood, you don't mean flying around on a broom and casting evil spells on people. There's a sort of enchanting, I found something beautiful in that, in the sense that you didn't mean it necessarily literally, but because you felt like such an outsider, that you dreamt a bit of being a bit of a dissident, or how would you explain that?
When I was 4, I just remember being at the society party, and I didn't really feel, I never felt connected with this sort of grandeur and this elitism. It's never been part of my makeup and who I am. So at 4 and 5, you sort of just pretend play and you imagine you're somewhere else and doing something else. But as you grow up and you look back on your life, you realize, well, what is a witch? A witch historically has always been an outlier. It's been a woman who's not been accepted by the larger society. It's a woman who has her own path and her own sort of vision and her own voice. And so I feel it's really symbolic that I would choose to be a witch, at age 4 and eventually grow up to be that outlier.
Shireen, my producer and my cameraman and everyone around me, most of them are from Persia, and they will be very happy to hear that you were much happier in Iran than Pakistan. Am I correct?
I was. Iran was beautiful, and it's unfortunate that it has this sort of thick political layer around it right now, and the theocracy is what it is. But again, when you're young, you experience the world differently. And so Iran was just a lot more freer than Pakistan. The people were more welcoming, and that had probably a lot to do with, again, we look at the Middle East and we think of it as this one big clump of territories, but each country is so different, each culture is so different.
And we're not speaking about, obviously, the oppressive totalitarian Islamic Republic. We're just speaking about the people and the culture among the people. Exactly. We're going to have to go, but Shireen, you write so many profound things, but one really crucial thing that you say in one of your recent pieces. Shireen, you would think that the Obama administration that wanted to supposedly surround itself with Muslims, you would think that Shireen Qudosi would be there advising Obama. But that wasn't the case. Muslims like you were not welcome. People like, Zuhdi Jasser, not welcome. It was the Muslim Brotherhood front groups. What's your interpretation of that? How come people like you were not invited by the Obama administration, but the people that support political Islam and, enable jihad and stealth jihad were at his right-hand side?
We didn't exist, actually. It wasn't even that we weren't invited. We literally did not exist for Obama. We did not exist for Islamic groups. And what the left likes to think of is this sort of fantasy land of where everyone gets along and all this diversity is really great, but it's not. Not all ideas are equal. Not all values should be upheld. My values as an American Muslim are vastly different than the values of Islamist Muslims. So under Obama, it was just this one narrative. And I think the most interesting thing about that is what you saw the day after Trump won the election. You had the very same people who would systematically shut out Muslim free thinkers, the Islamists, come out and say, well, we should all work together. I'm like, no, we should not work together. We didn't exist for you in the last 8 years. And you would say that working with these people would be like trying to work with Nazis in the hopes of dealing with the Nazi ideology. You don't. You confront it and you challenge it. You don't sit at the table with Nazis and try to play nice and hope that they're going to change. They're not going to change.
Shireen, where do you get your courage from?
It's a very good question. I feel like it's just there. It's always been there. I don't know any other way to be than this. It's like asking me not to breathe. You just do it.
Shireen, before we go, under a minute, the last few nights when you're going to sleep, what are you thinking about and what are you most passionate about in terms of the struggle we face?
At the moment, I am most passionate about really, really pressing forward the values that we have as Americans. If there's obviously, as you see, there's a huge gap politically in terms of, where the right's at and where the left's at. And I have friends who are liberals. I have friends overseas who don't understand what's going on in the United States, and they're seeing the world really differently. These are not bad people. These are just people who haven't had my experiences. They haven't lived my life. They haven't had to deal with my challenges. They don't know what it's like to live under this oppressive ideology where people don't question where these rules are coming from. They don't question God. They don't question theocracy. So my role right now is really to foster American values and make sure those are put on the pedestal and those are cherished and protected. And at the same time, bridge the gap so that we don't have people trying to undermine free thinkers under the idea of, oh, we're just trying to get along. It's not about getting along. It's about doing the right thing.
Thank you, Shireen. And those viewers of ours that are going to be inspired by you and want to get in touch with you and support what you're doing, where do they go?
Go to americamatters.com, and you can also find me on Twitter at Shireen Qudosi.
Fantastic. Shireen, thank you so much for everything you're doing, and also thank you for the person that you are.
Thank you for having me, Jamie.
And we hope you'll come back. Thank you, Shireen.
Absolutely.
And thank you for watching the Glazov Gang. If you like what we do, please support us at jamieglazov.com and make sure you're subscribed to the YouTube channel of the Glazov Gang. Good night.